In the wake of the Second Vatican Council, unprecedented change was introduced into the Catholic Church. One should keep in mind that change is not bad in and of itself. The Church has the right to make legitimate adaptations to her liturgy. A change does not automatically invalidate a rite, or even necessarily make it depart from what would be considered the Catholic norm. Consider that the Eastern rites look very different from the Latin rite, and yet these differences are only in the accidentals. The substance of these varied liturgies remains the same. Now, the defenders of Vatican II claim that although the Church after the Council looks very different from the Church before the Council, all these differences were only superficial, and the essential nature of the faith remains unchanged. They maintain that the Church after the Council still had complete continuity with the Church of the past. But is their claim true? Were the changes introduced at Vatican II only accidental change, or did these changes actually alter the substance of the faith? The objections that are raised to the changes of the Council are not just a knee-jerk reaction to change, but rather the objections are to the nature of the changes. Consider that the Catholic Church before Vatican II taught that only those who are baptized and profess the true faith can be considered members of the Catholic Church. But the new Church of Vatican II teaches that all the baptized are in communion with the Church. The Catholic Church before Vatican II taught that there was no salvation outside the Catholic Church, but the new Church of Vatican II teaches that God uses non-Catholic churches as a means of salvation. They went from no one, even if he has shed his blood in the name of Christ, can be saved unless he has remained in the bosom and unity of the Catholic Church, to the Spirit of Christ has not refrained from using other religions as a means of salvation.
See, there was a heresy at one time that you had to be Catholic, otherwise you didn't go to heaven. That's not what the Church teaches. All people are saved by the merits of Jesus, the grace in the Church, but they don't have to be Catholic.
This is not merely an accidental change. Any honest person must admit that these changes introduced at Vatican II actually alter the substance of the faith. And yet, notwithstanding clear evidence to the contrary, the modernists still claim that the faith has not changed. One of the techniques they use to support their contention is to redefine terms. This allows them to use Catholic-sounding vocabulary while meaning something completely different. For example, consider how the Second Vatican Council redefines what is meant by the Church. Dogmatic Constitution Lumen Gentium. Quote, "This Church, constituted and organized in the world as a society, subsists in the Catholic Church, which is governed by the successor of Peter and by the bishops in communion with him, although many elements of sanctification and of truth are found outside of its visible structure." In the modernist definition, the Church of Jesus Christ is not exclusively identified as the Catholic Church. They hold that the Church of Jesus Christ only subsists in the Catholic Church. They introduced a new and false ecumenism, whereby non-Catholic churches participate in a partial communion with the true Church, and therefore, because they are in partial communion, they are already part of the Church of Jesus Christ, and therefore, conversion is not necessary.
Non è lecito convincere della tua fede. Il proselitismo è il veleno più forte contro il cammino ecumenico.
Vatican II attempted to create a new kind of unity whereby Catholics and non-Catholics can join together without conversion. To achieve this ecumenical unity, the new Church would focus on those things held in common and just ignore the differences. But every counterfeit has some elements in common with a genuine article, and no one would try to give a partial value to counterfeit money by pointing out all those elements that it has in common with genuine money. Any unbiased observer who puts the decrees of Vatican II alongside past church teaching will see that they are in fact two different religions. Nevertheless, the sad reality is that the vast majority of Catholics have come to accept this new religion as though nothing has really changed. However, there is a small group of remnant Catholics who refuse to change their religion. Those faithful Catholics who hold firmly to the faith of their fathers are called traditional Catholics. The term traditional Catholic is unfortunate because it seems to imply that there can be different kinds of Catholics. But the Catholic religion does not admit of different degrees. There can be no such thing as a modern Catholic or a traditional Catholic. One must accept the Catholic faith in its entirety or not at all. The person who denies only one point of faith is no more Catholic than a person who denies the faith in its entirety. In his encyclical letter Ad Beatissimi Apostolorum, Pope Benedict XV writes, quote, "Such is the nature of Catholicism that it does not admit of more or less, but must be held as a whole or as a whole rejected." Confusion arises, however, because even though the Vatican II Church teaches a new faith, they still continue to call themselves Catholic, and in the new Church there is a staggering variety of belief. There are liberal politicians who support abortion and birth control, and yet they still call themselves Catholic. There are Novus Ordo clergy who support same-sex marriage and communion for the divorced and remarried, and yet they still call themselves Catholic. And there are even Novus Ordo popes who participate in idolatry and instruct non-Catholics not to convert to the Catholic faith, and yet they still call themselves Catholic.
¿Voy a convencer a otro que se haga católico? No, no, no.
It is therefore necessary to make a distinction between those who hold the Catholic faith and those who hold the Novus Ordo modernist religion. For this reason, the term traditional Catholic has come into popular use. However, tradition is perhaps not the best description because tradition can give the impression that the resistance to Vatican II is only based on a preference for traditional liturgy, or perhaps just a nostalgic appreciation for Latin. However, to be a traditional Catholic means more than just traditional liturgy. It means holding fast to the faith handed down from the apostles. Now, those Catholics who resisted the revolution of Vatican II represent only a small remnant, and therefore, if a qualifier is necessary, remnant Catholic would be a more accurate description. That being said, we must always remember that even though we use the qualifier traditional Catholic to make a necessary distinction, we are in reality just Catholics. Now, the vast majority of Catholics simply accepted the new religion as though nothing had really changed. But this raises the question, how were the innovators able to replace the Catholic Church with a counterfeit church without any meaningful opposition? During the Second Vatican Council and immediately following, there were no hugely noticeable changes. It was not until they began to introduce changes to the Mass that faithful Catholics came to understand that something was terribly wrong.
Because most people in America, at least in our parish, we didn't talk about Vatican II. We just heard all these changes every Sunday. You know, next week when you come, there won't be any communion rail because we're supposed to move it out. Next week when you come, we're going to be moving a piano up to the front, whatever. It was week after week after week, and it wore down on people like us. I would have to say most of the parish just kind of smiled and thought, this is kind of exciting. I don't really know. I just know that my mother did lose all her friends, and she had many friends. But when she made the choice between Vatican II and the Catholic faith, she did lose them all.
What started with a few changes quickly turned into the complete transformation of Catholic liturgy. The liturgy changed from a reverent Latin Mass, where the priest faced the tabernacle and communion was given on the tongue, to a very informal vernacular service, where the priest faced the people and communion was given in the hand. Because the Mass was the most visible change, resistance to the revolution of Vatican II came to be identified with resistance to the new Mass. Many people were content to find a Latin Mass and not concern themselves with the larger issues of exactly what had transpired. It is understandable, therefore, that much of the traditional movement identifies itself with an effort to restore the Latin Mass. But restoring the Latin Mass alone will not restore the Church. This is because the new Mass is only a symptom of the underlying disease. The true disease is false ecumenism. According to this new ecumenical view of the Church, all the various churches are already in a partial communion with the Catholic Church. The goal of this new ecumenism is therefore to bring Catholic and non-Catholic together into a kind of unity that does not involve conversion. However, the Catholic Mass stood as an obstacle to this new ecumenical unity. The traditional Catholic Mass embodies the entire Christian religion because in its prayers are contained every article of the Catholic faith. The prayers of the Mass contain such Catholic doctrines as transubstantiation, the Mass offered as a sacrifice for sin, the Trinity, heaven, hell, purgatory, prayer for the dead, the intercession of Mary and the saints, and much more. The new Mass was just the necessary consequence of false ecumenism. How could Catholic and non-Catholic join together in a common worship with the Mass that expressed all these offensive Catholic doctrines? This is why the Catholic Mass had to go. It was replaced with a generic ecumenical service that can accommodate almost any belief. First, they removed all the prayers that contained uniquely Catholic doctrines. Next, they replaced those prayers with prayers that can have double meaning, so that the new Mass neither confirms nor denies a faith in anything. They then introduced a variety of options. This allows each priest to choose the option that best fits the faith of any given assembly. No need to convert the people to the Catholic faith, just change the service to accommodate whatever the people believe. This is why finding a Latin Mass alone does not solve the problem. It only covers up the symptoms. Unfortunately, the majority of traditional Catholics seem content to find a Latin Mass and ignore the fact that their church is teaching a different faith. However, just as a disease cannot be properly treated unless it is first correctly diagnosed, so also none of the problems in the church today can be addressed unless they are first correctly identified. The recognize and resist traditionalists seem unwilling to admit that a church cannot be Catholic if it does not profess the Catholic faith. Rather than rejecting this new church for the counterfeit that it is, they accept it as the legitimate Catholic Church, but only give it a partial value. They sift its teachings and accept only those parts they judge to be in conformity with their understanding of tradition. But such an approach is not only opposed to the Catholic faith, it is opposed to right reason. They would not use such reasoning in any other aspect of life. For example, if they were to have a genuine $20 bill, it would not matter if it were tattered and dirty. They would still honor it with full spending value. And likewise, if they were to receive a counterfeit $20 bill, it would not matter how much it looked like the real thing. They would give it no value at all. And they would certainly not accept a counterfeit 20 and give it $10 of value because it looked so much like the real thing. But if they would not give partial value to counterfeit money, why would they give partial authority to a counterfeit church? This is the controversy that is dividing the traditional movement today. To acknowledge the post-conciliar popes as valid popes and assent to their teachings is to join them in their apostasy. To acknowledge them as valid popes but resist their teachings is schismatic and a denial that the Catholic Church must be one in its faith. However, there is another solution that does not contradict the Catholic faith and does not make one an apostate or a schismatic. It is the position that identifies the religion started at Vatican II as a counterfeit Catholicism, and as a counterfeit it gives it absolutely no value. This position is called Sedevacantism.